In today's video, I want to answer a really common question that I get asked all the time, and that's whether or not soy is healthy. Okay, so this question has come up a lot on my Instagram, in DMs and comments, especially when people see that I eat a plant-based diet. I know a really common, not misconception, but a common, food in a lot of vegan diets is soy because it's an easy replacement for a lot of the fake meats, a lot of cheese, it's found in tofu. So I think it's a common question for new vegans or anyone else to ask. And I just kind of want to get into whether or not it's healthy and give some fact and also my opinion on it. The first thing I'm going to do is kind of distinguish the difference between the soy that I'm talking about and natural soy. So there's natural forms of soy, which is basically a soybean. So you might also have heard of edamame. Edamame you can get at a lot of sushi restaurants. Edamame is kind of the immature version of a soybean, found in tempeh or in natto, and miso. So there's some naturally, occurring forms of soy. And that's the soy that I want to refer to in this video, whether or not that's healthy. I have examples of very highly processed soy here, and I want to just distinguish this is never healthy, but there's two different reasons. It's kind of like when I explain how, if you're talking about red meat or dairy, why is it unhealthy? I go through two different branches. Like number one, let's just talk about dairy on its own, okay? It's acidic, it can cause inflammation, but dairy on its own, if you're on a farm and the cow is very healthy and you're consuming like milk, is still going to be better for you than the processed form of dairy. So when I say cut out dairy, especially in like chips, crackers, food, processed food, it's because not only are you getting some of the negative effects of actual dairy, but you're also getting the negative effects of what the cow is fed. The hormones, antibiotics, you're getting the effects of like how it's processed from the cow to the cracker, like how long it's stored for, like what preservatives are added. So there's two different aspects to consider when you're like thinking about is something healthy. So when it comes to soy, I just wanted to share like this is a good example of some processed soy, which I'll get into later, but I would never talk about the benefits of processed soy. Like I would just say avoid it. But there are some versions of natural soy where it can be healthy and cannot. So let's get into those now. Like most foods or most things, there's oftentimes a lot of data that can show positive effects and negative effects. So when it comes to natural soy, there's actually been a good amount of published data that shows positive effects. Number one, it can reduce bad cholesterol. It can kind of help manage cholesterol levels. It also contains a compound called isoflavones, which increases estrogen. It can actually cause a lot of positive benefits from that. It can lower your risk of colorectal cancer, of breast cancer. I know it might sound weird that increasing your estrogen can actually reduce the risk of certain cancers because oftentimes we hear about when you increase estrogen, it causes a negative effect. But in this case, there have been studies that show that it can reduce the risk of this. Now, on that same front, the fact that these isoflavones increase estrogen can also lead to negative effects where it can increase the risk of certain hormone-related cancers. Another thing people notice with too much soy consumption, because it increases estrogen, is that it can cause an increase in fat, especially maybe around the midline. It can cause irritability, mood swings. In fact, this is a fun little fact here. Oftentimes, a lot of bodybuilders will take estrogen blockers because estrogen is known for kind of keeping you, they call it like soft, like skinny soft almost, where you just don't ever get that like hard, muscly look. I'm definitely not condoning this. I don't think that's natural or good at all, but I know it's done a lot. So there's definitely some truth to that. So maybe not in that extreme, but overeating things with that can mimic estrogen can cause these effects. Now we're obviously talking about soy here, and soy isn't estrogen, but because it can mimic it and it can increase it, that's why we've got these effects. Okay, so I've kind of gone over different studies and how they show the negative and positive, but another thing I really want to go over is the processed soy and how it can be hidden. So I have an example here of soy milk. I really wanted to talk about this because I oftentimes will share little bits in my like Instagram stories of like, I will avoid soy. Like for example, if I'm at a coffee shop and they only have soy milk, usually I'll just get the coffee black. If I really want a latte, maybe I'll have a little bit, but I really don't like to rely on it. But if they have almond or coconut, I will. So people always want to back up, like, is soy unhealthy? So when it comes to processed soy, I would really recommend avoiding it because at this point, you're just getting a lot of the negative and you're not getting any of the positive that might come from like the natural source of soy. So soy milk in general is one that I would avoid, especially things like this that have natural flavors and extra cane sugar. There's just so many better options. I think that when you are in a jam, like let's say you need milk for a recipe for something important and like you only have soy milk or regular milk, I would choose the soy. But because there's so many better options, I talk about this a lot, like when it's easy to pick something else, I just kind of try to avoid it. I also wanted to share how it can be hidden in a lot of different protein bars. If you see anything that says soy protein isolate, this one even has like roasted soybeans. Soy protein isolate, I would definitely recommend avoiding. It's found in a lot of different bars. It's found in protein powder. Sometimes it's just used as a filler in different foods. So always look on the back for that too. And then another really common form of soy is in like fake vegan meat. Like this is just an example I got. This one's like, you know, chicken strips, Morningstar. Let's see what it's got. Contains soy, contains wheat, soy protein isolate. This one has soy and gluten, so you're kind of getting a lot of negative here. So when I first went vegan, this was my favorite thing to do, was to eat like, oh my God, it tastes just like chicken. Because to be honest, they're seasoned really well. Sometimes the texture is amazing. So it really can give you that same flavor. And I would always think it was super easy to not have to eat regular chicken or regular meat. But I've really come to not rely on these and really never eat them, to be honest. The only time I eat like a fake chicken or fake meat or something is when it's like considered my junk food day. I don't necessarily want to call it a cheat day. I think that term isn't always the healthiest to go by, but if I'm just having like a bad craving or whatever, I'll go for it. Kind of the same way if I wasn't vegan and let's say I wanted a craving, I would go for something like that too. So I consider it my like cheat, whatever you want to call it, meal, but it's not something I rely on every day. One thing you also have to watch out for is when people or different restaurants will say like textured protein or textured plant protein, textured vegetable protein. This is usually just a fancy way of saying soy protein isolate. Even one of my absolutely favorite like healthy cafes in New York City, it's called Le Botaniste. Not to call them out, I actually love them. But sometimes you're even at a really clean place and they can have it. They have this like textured soy protein like spaghetti bolognese. And sometimes you're at a place like that, you just can assume that everything's going to be super healthy, but it's just good to know these little terms. I'll even make sure I pop them up here so you guys can take a screenshot and you'll know what to look out for in terms of processed soy. So we kind of know these are all no's. Let's avoid the processed soy. So when it comes to natural forms of soy, I feel like we should get to the conclusion of this video, like what's my take on it? I personally try to avoid it. It's something that I used to have a lot of in my diet, but I've actually even taken a food allergy test and I've found that I have a little bit of an intolerance to it. I don't think that the benefits outweigh the risk. Like the benefits of possibly preventing breast cancer or possibly lowering your cholesterol aren't enough to kind of equal out the risk of it. It's something that I maybe will have once or twice a month, but it's not something that's like regular in my diet. I really try to go for more like whole food sources of protein. Like if I want to make like a lentil loaf or use like beans as a source of protein or nuts or seeds, things like that. When it comes to vegan cheeses, a lot of them will like have like a tofu base, but I always like to go for the ones that are almond based. If you'll notice, the ones that I recommend in my videos are usually Kite Hill and Miyoko's because both of those are nut based. So you've got like an almond and a cashew base. So I just try to avoid it as much as I can. Do I eat it sometimes? Do I sometimes eat tempeh? Do I sometimes eat like edamame? Yes, but on a regular basis, I don't. That's my personal opinion on it. Like I said, you can find the data that kind of goes both ways. I will say that I do think it's a little bit like over demonized because oftentimes a lot of these studies are funded by meat companies who want you to eat meat. So of course they want to kind of push it on you that it's not. You have to always make sure you're digging deeper there and knowing where the source is from. If you find negative studies or a lot of negative data, I would try to challenge yourself to look for opposite data because oftentimes if you search, you can find it and just see, you know, you can even look up in the study, who was it funded by, who's writing the article, like who are they supported by. I know that's like a lot of headache to go through, but just to give you a little bit of background as to why it's not always so black and white. So I hope that kind of answered any questions you have on my opinion on soy. You know, just even to wrap it up, avoid processed soy. Once in a while, natural soy is okay, but don't depend on it as your regular go-to meals. So if you have any questions, please leave it in the comments and let me know if you want me to kind of elaborate on this more, or maybe back up this video with a few like non-soy recipes. I can do that. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.